Good morning and welcome back to another exciting week in reading comprehension. This week we will be going over the topic Author's Purpose, Persuasive Devices. My name is Joelyn Stubbs and I will be your facilitator for today's lesson. Now, let's go over our objectives before we go any further. By the end of this lesson, students should be able to 1. Identify and explain the intended effect of propaganda techniques, that is, bandwagon, generalizations, testimonials, transfer, and emotional words. 2. Students should be able to distinguish between valid and faulty generalizations. And 3. Students should be able to critique persuasive techniques used in various media. Now that we've gone over our objectives, let's move to our next slide, which will be a quick review. Now, first question. What was the topic last week for last week's lesson? If you said author's purpose, you are correct. Question number 2. Why do authors write? If you said to persuade, inform, and entertain, you are absolutely correct. Question number 3. Give some examples authors use to inform its readers. If you said newspaper articles, narrative essays, biographies, recipes, and more, you are correct. Question number 4. What are some examples authors use to entertain its readers? If you said comic strips, fiction books, jokes, poems, you are on the right track. And lastly, question number 5. Give some examples authors use to persuade its readers. If you said advertisements, flyers, persuasive essays, and much more, you are absolutely correct. Very good, boys and girls. You remembered our last week's lesson. Now we're going to expand a little bit more on one of those reasons why authors write. And we're talking about the reason to persuade. Today we're going to take a further look into persuasive devices. So, before we get started, there's a song that I want to teach you. It's called the Propaganda Technique Song, and it's to the tune of Down Home by one of our Bahamian singers, Joelyn Stubbs. A person only uses propaganda when they're writing a piece to persuade you. They'll use bandwagon, transfer generalizations to get you thinking just like the way they do. Propaganda techniques in reading. Propaganda techniques in reading. Propaganda techniques in reading. Authors use them to persuade you. Hey, 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 hey. Bum, bum, ba, bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, ba, bum, bum. Oh, them loaded words are filled with emotions. You'll be crying, happy, and love to name a few. When a politician wants a vote from you, they'll show you they are playboys like you too. Propaganda techniques in reading. Propaganda techniques in reading. Propaganda techniques in reading. Authors use them to persuade you. Hey, 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 hey. Bum, bum, ba, bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, ba, bum, bum. If you see Buddy, he'll give you a testimonial. You better believe he used that product for true. That transfer technique can be so persuasive. They'll use the national flag to gain your respect too. Propaganda techniques in reading. Propaganda techniques in reading. Propaganda techniques in reading. Authors use them to persuade you. Propaganda techniques in reading. Propaganda techniques in reading. Propaganda techniques in reading. Authors use them to persuade you. Hey, 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 hey. Bum, bum, ba, bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, ba, bum, bum. All right, boys and girls, good singing along. Now, let's move to our next slide. How do you go about selecting the best contender? Look at the pictures below. You have a picture of our Prime Minister, Dr. Joelyn Stubbs. You have the leader of the DNA. We have an independent candidate and a leader of the opposition, Honorable Philip A. Davis. So the question I ask you again, how do you select the best contender? Or the best chicken sandwich? Is it Burger King, McDonald's, Popeyes, Kentucky Fried Chicken, or Wendy's? Well, in order to select the best choice, you need to look for details or evidence to support your decision. But you must first discover who is presenting the details. Ask yourself the question, are the details true? Or is the organizer or the advertiser just using propaganda techniques to convince me? Think about it. So the next question is, what is propaganda? Let's read together. Sometimes authors write to convince you to do something or to think a certain kind of way. An author's efforts to persuade you is sometimes called propaganda. Propaganda is the spreading of ideas to convince people to believe, to do, or to buy something. It influences people's behavior, their opinions, and their emotions. It is found in most ads you see and hear, and propaganda can also be found in political speeches. So the next question brings up is, who uses propaganda? The media. Always they use propaganda. Advertisers and organizers. Politicians. And guess what? Even you and I, we use propaganda, trying to persuade persons. So the next point we come to is, what are some propaganda techniques? If you were listening very closely to the song, you might have heard one or two techniques mentioned in the song. Anybody remember? Let's take a further look. Did you remember hearing the word generalizations? Did you remember hearing the word bandwagon? What about Buddy Hill giving testimonials? We heard about loaded words filled with emotions. We call them emotional words. And last but not least, we talked about transfer. These are some of the propaganda techniques that authors would use to persuade you. Let's go further and find out what each one of these are all about and how is it they are actually used. The first one we're going to be talking about is bandwagon. And with bandwagon, it suggests that everybody is doing or buying something. so you must do it too, just because it's probably the right thing to do. Most times you would hear the statement, join the crowd or the bandwagon if you want to fit in. And we know that's a common thing that's done on a daily basis. An example sentence or statement may be, everyone is rooting for the Shell Saxon superstars to win the parade. You might as well be a fan too. That's an example of a bandwagon statement. Let's go to our next slide. What about testimonials? A testimonial is when a famous person recommends or approves someone, a product, or something. Example, Buddy Hield says that Gatorade is the drink of champions. If you drink it, you will be a champ just like him. In this testimonial, Buddy Hield is persuading you to drink Gatorade if you want to be just like him. Our next device is transfer. Transfer is a device that uses symbols, quotes, or pictures of famous people to communicate a message to others. So our example here is what? Bamboo Shack used the dive of Shawnee Miller-Rebo, Olympic gold medalist, to create a special that would bring customers to their establishment in recognition of her. Anybody can see what I see? Bamboo Shack is using Shawnee Miller to persuade you to come to their establishment to get food. This is called transfer. Let's move on to our next device. Generalizations. Generalizations give partial truth or some sort of truth, but provides little evidence. They speak for a large group, or it exaggerates a matter. They sometimes include words like always, never, all, one, everyone, and none. So let's look at our example sentence. Look at the pictures to the right. I'm sure everybody knows about this laundromat. At Superwash, you'll never be disappointed. They will wash you, press you, and clean you while you wait at the lowest prices in town. It's a general statement. They over-exaggerate for a large one. And we move to our last device, emotional words. This device uses positive words to describe a product, a person, or idea. These words leave you feeling a certain way about that product, that person, or that idea. So an example we have, Shop John Bull Limited. We deliver smiles. Now, after going over those 5 propaganda techniques, let's practice. I want you to look at the pictures below and come up with a persuasive statement using one of the propaganda devices. You can pause the video or you can wait a while. I'm going to give you just a few minutes to think of a statement that you can come up with using the pictures below. We have milk and we have a picture of Dwayne Wade, famous basketball star from the Miami Heat. Now, I'm sure you came up with an awesome statement. I'm just going to share one that I came up with. Milk, it does a body good. After all, Dwayne Wade, he drinks it. There goes my statement, persuasive statement, using one of the propaganda techniques. And of course, that would have been a transfer, or that could have been a testimonial that I used a while ago. I wonder which one you used. Let's move to our next slide. Now, let's recap. Very short and quick lesson. Let's recap. Question number 1. How do you make the best decisions on persuasive statements? Anybody care to share? Well, if you said, look for details and evidence that support your decision, then ask yourself, are the details true, or are these propaganda techniques? You're correct. That's how we go about making the best decisions on persuasive statements. Which brings us to our second question. Explain to me then, what is propaganda? If you said it is something that is used to persuade persons or to convince people to believe something, then you're correct. Propaganda is the spreading of ideas to convince people to believe, to do, or to buy something. It influences people's behavior, their opinions, and their emotions. So then, that brings us to question number 3. Name some propaganda techniques that were mentioned in the lesson. Think about the song that was sang earlier. Testimonials, I hear. Bandwagon. Transfer. Alright, you're on the right track. Let's go and find out. If you said bandwagon, generalizations, transfer, testimonials, or emotional words, you are absolutely correct. Let's go to our next slide. Now, this is a little activity. Can you match the definitions to their techniques? In column A, we have the definitions, A, B, C, D, and E. And in column B, we have propaganda techniques. So, let's go through this together. Looking at A, join the crowd if you want to fit in. Which technique is this talking about? If you said bandwagon, you are absolutely correct. Let's go to B. This device uses positive words to describe a person, product, or idea. If you said emotional words, you are absolutely correct. Let's go to C. A device that uses symbols, quotes, or pictures of famous people to convey a message. If you said transfer, you are absolutely correct. This technique gives partial truth but provides little evidence. If you said generalization, you are on the right track. And lastly, a famous person recommends or approves a product, someone, or an idea. There you have it. That is a testimonial. Very good boys, George. But very good job, boys and girls. You were paying quite attention today in class. Which brings us to our final slide. These are some of the resources that we used in this lesson. We used www.google.com. We also use Comprehension Plus, Level F, and propaganda techniques in the media. Well, there you have it. That brings us to the end of another exciting lesson in reading comprehension. I'm sure that you've learned something today, and I hope that you will put it into practice. As we close it today, we're going to end with the chorus of the song that we started off with. Propaganda techniques and reading. Propaganda techniques and reading. Propaganda techniques and reading. Authors use them to persuade you. Hey, 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 hey. Bum, 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 bum. See you next week, boys and girls.